Hello and welcome back to GamesIndustry.biz Live, and specifically our Best Places to Work Awards 2020 for the UK. This session is a pre-recorded chat with Siobhan Reddy, the studio director of the acclaimed games developer Media Molecule, famous for Little Big Planet, Tearaway, and of course its latest game, the PS4 hit Dreams. Siobhan has won numerous awards through the years, both for her work in the industry and the games that she's helped create, and was crowned the UK Best Boss at this event last year. So welcome back. How are you doing?
Well, thank you very much. That was a lovely introduction. I'm doing great, thank you. Just happy to have a chat.
Yeah, it's been a weird year.
Yeah, it definitely has been it's been an epic year on so many levels. So,
well, I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the year that you've had and we've all had a little bit. But I thought I'd start off because there might be someone possibly who is watching this that doesn't know much about you or your journey. So I thought maybe we should start there. Now, okay. I think you joined the games industry in the late 1990s. Yep. Is that right?
That's right. Yep. 1998.
Oh. So, yep. I mean, talk us through that journey. What made you want to get involved in
okay.
games?
I mean, I sort of grew up, sort of creative kid, like always into dressing up and make believe and storytelling and films and music. And from when we were really little, my mum was fairly instrumental in always taking us to art shows. From like when we were like tiny babies, we were going to the galleries, and I think that just really instilled within me this love of art and culture. And as I grew up, I was just always kind of collecting different interests. We had games machine consoles, but that wasn't my first love at all. Like that was more of a social thing that I did with my brothers and sisters. My brother and sister at home at the time, we'd play games together. But it was sort of really my brother's game stuff. Like it was always in his bedroom. And then it did get moved out into like the family room. But it was kind of something very much about us playing together. And yeah, and then as I got into teen years, I got like really into making these little fanzine things. They're like little sort of punk rock magazines, and I was really into music and going to gigs. Sydney had this like amazing all age music scene, so a lot of bands would just do like the all age shows in the afternoon and then do the adult shows in the evening, and it was brilliant. So my friends and I spent a lot of time going into the city, going to gigs, and I made this little fanzine, and I loved that. And then I got really into making little short films, and spent time doing that, and worked really hard to get into film school. That was my trajectory. And actually, once I got in, it was a hard school to get into, but once I got in, I sort of had this moment of, I didn't think I was going to get in, so I had gone looking for a job, and I took this job as a PA to this guy who ran a web design company. And I actually got into the film school, but I'd already taken this job and I could move into the city. And I had this moment of thinking, oh, I'll come back to that. I'll go work and see the world, and then I will go back and do film school when I've had more experiences and adventures. But the web stuff actually was really interesting. It sort of showed me that, what they were doing was they were like working with different art galleries and like a lot of art galleries and car companies. And it was at these two different ends of the spectrum of different types of experiences that they were wanting to provide people via the web. And like the very first travel company in Australia to go online, like I saw that all happen. It was just really fascinating time. And then that was also the time when lots of people after you leave school, a lot of people travel, and some people travel around Australia, and I came over here to England, and it was here actually that sort of the games industry became the sort of an idea. But and it was actually after playing Resident Evil, that is like my sort of catalyst game, where I realized that actually it did a lot of the things that I loved. Like I loved film, I loved theatre, I loved horror. And I'd grown up like, in the era of the Bermuda Triangle was a big deal. So, if you remember that era, but like, there were these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And then when I played that, I was like, oh, right, like games can be this thing that I love. So I knew someone who worked in games, and I just basically, I think, went to Aardvark Swift and was like, here's my CV, and got my very first job in London at Perfect Entertainment, and stayed there and for a little bit. And my kind of most important first job, well, this was my second job, was at Criterion, where I worked for Fiona Sperry. My first job, actually, I was hired by Lucy Black. I've said this before, but yeah, Lucy, I still work with Lucy to this day. She's like one of my best friends. She hired me in, and we worked together at Perfect. And then I went off to Criterion, and I worked at Criterion for 7 years for Fiona. Had amazing experiences working there. Started right at the end of Trick Style, where they were finishing that, and then working on Airblade, and then Burnout 3 and Burnout Revenge before moving on to Media Molecule. So it was just, but I think that very first moment of going into a game studio, I also had this moment of like, when you walk around one and you sort of see for the first time, and this sounds really dumb, like, to anyone who's worked in the industry, they're like, I think probably just think it sounds really dumb. But for me, it was, that moment of walking around and going, oh my God, like the animator room, I'll never forget it. The animation room looked, everyone in it and how their desks were all laid out was completely different to like the audio room and then the programming room, because the company was in sort of all in little rooms. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, I love this energy. I love like how there's all these different types of people coming together to make this thing. And they're all, just these like incredible creative brains. And I was so excited to actually get going. And I think for years it really was the people and the, and still to this day, I love working with different, all of the different flavors of creative people. And I love discovering how you really help someone succeed and help make a game together and all of that. So yeah, once I was in that door, I was kind of hooked on the feeling of like how you, and wanting to learn how you actually make a game and how you come together. And then I was, with Criterion, I was just really lucky to be there at that time when, Fiona had taken the helm of Criterion Games and was turning it from really being the studio that made example games for renderware into being a studio that was known for making games because of the games. And I was just very fortunate to be there at that time and see that happen. And, to have been part of Burnout 3 is still, a huge career highlight. We'll never, ever forget that moment and the team coming together around that game. So yeah, and then Media Molecule, like, wow, what a journey. 15 in January, so that's like quite mad.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I know, it's mad, huh?
Well,
but,
I used to work at a games testing company called University Speaking, based in my local town, run by Vicky Pence. And I left just before Little Big Planet came in to be tested.
No.
So that was I missed out on. My brothers tested it, worked on it, but I didn't. I'd moved on at that point. So I remember the sort of birth of the studio quite well, because that's also when I sort of entered the business.
Right, well, cool.
Yeah, so it's not really a connection, but
sort of. It's an interesting time frame, isn't it? Like that's a long, it's 15 years, so yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you've mentioned Burnout 3 there. I mean, and you've worked on some pretty huge successes down the years, some real critical darlings. What have been the biggest milestones or the biggest moments that you've had so far?
I mean, definitely Burnout 3. Excuse me. So, I mean, I can't ever forget like when we shipped Airblade, by the way. Like that was like the first game I worked on from beginning to end with the team. And, I'll never forget, it's really taught me the bonds that you create when you ship a game with people. And I will never forget being in that Criterion boardroom, smoking cigars and drinking champagne. Like, it was amazing. But in terms of like, I guess like big career highlights of things like, being there at the point when we were really figuring out what needed to happen to Burnout, to turn it from what we had into being the Burnout it became. And that was very much about like trying to find the game in there and amplifying it to like the power of 10. So I'm sure the story's been told like a million times, but there was a point with Burnout where it was not as OTT. I mean, Burnout 1 and 2, you can see those, like the very big difference between 2 and 3 is it just is like OTT, you know, everything, it's more, you know, the sparks and the speed, and, you know, and there was, like, it was just being there through those moments of actually seeing the iteration process we went through, being part of that iteration process was a really amazing and very transformative moment, and I will never forget that. And I still reference it a lot. Like, it is definitely a point where I think when we've got something and maybe it's not quite working, it's like, okay, is this one of those moments where it's just the idea is in there but we're not showing it, or is it just the idea is great? You know, somebody just have to, you know. So I always go back to that Little Big Planet, and then obviously, you know, the acclaim that came from Burnout was amazing, but the, you know, Little Big Planet one, like that being announced at GDC and the response just being so incredibly positive is a and it's a career moment that you can never replicate it. You know, it's like one of those moments that you have, and it's just so special and important to remember and not try to relive. And then with, you know, dreams, I think things like there's been these various milestones along the way and some of them for me are things like realizing moments where it's like, right, this isn't your normal game. This is something more than that, and it's a platform for people. And actually seeing that develop and grow has been, you know, because it's been so much work, and to get to that granularity and to be able to give people that kind of power on their couches is something that, you know, has been our vision for a long time. So to see that start to happen is something that's really, you know, is really great. So those three are like the highlights. Yeah, I love, it's hard because, you know, I love working on Tearaway also, and, you know, there was amazing moments working on that project, especially all the little letters we got from all the kids. Like, oh my God, they were so sweet. Like that game generated the most gorgeous fan art ever. Like the people who loved it, wow, they were so beautiful in how they wrote to us and told us.
It's probably my favourite medium on it. I haven't played enough of Dreams.
Really? Amazing.
I adore Tearaway.
Well, good.
It was the one game I finished on Vita. Yeah. But it was what a wonderful game that was. Always very
special. That was great. Like one of my favourite memories of that game has been little things like we were really worried about, because, you know, there's all these layers of characters in Tearaway, and we had to figure out who knew what, like who knew about the finger, who knew about the U, basically. And Kenny, Rex and I would have these big conversations about this, and, you know, in the end we decided that only the squirrels knew. Squirrels knew everything. But I just was, you know, you just have these moments where you're just like, so I love this about video games, where you're like, well, of course the squirrels would know. Like the squirrels would know, and the green man would know, and the fortune teller would know, but like nobody else would. No one else, just the squirrels.
Just the squirrels. Well, of course. It's a very video game conversation. Well, I mean, I'd love this. Well, that's brilliant. Well, I mean, let's talk about sort of the here and now a little bit, and sort of why we're here. I mean, well, actually, let's talk a little bit about the bizarre situation we're finding ourselves in today. Normally, we'd be on stage having this conversation, but here we are. How have things been at Media Molecule during the whole COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, you know, it's been really tough. I mean, being part of PlayStation has been absolutely amazing. So Sony have just taken such a brilliant line on everything, and, you know, we were home, working from home early. We were, you know, they've really, I think the messaging we've had right from the very top and right from the very start has just been excellent. You know, we had so yeah, it from that perspective, that's made it very easy for us because we've had very clear and good direction. And then you just get into the situation of, you know, needing to figure out how to work together. And so we had, we've sort of been practicing some degree of flexible working for a number of years, with various molecules whose lives have them living in various parts of the country and sometimes other countries. And so we sort of lent on our experiences there a little bit. We've, gone all in on the Slack. I think everybody's using so much Slack. We're learning the pros and cons of that, how to communicate with each other, things like how to, how, and in the earlier days in particular, I think we were very mindful of like how trying to figure out the balance between like, how many conversations to have, like, or how many events to put on, or like, should we be having a weekly happy hour or quizzes or various different things. And we've sort of just been trying to, work that out over time and make sure we're supporting people as much as possible, not being too annoying as much as possible, and learning really how to, how to communicate. Communication's the biggest thing, obviously. I think for us, luckily, with Dreams, we know what we're doing, like, and so we were working on the VR version for VR expansion for the first few months, and that had an incredibly clear focus. So that sort of really helped galvanize us around those first few months. And as that came to an end and we're starting to work on the next stuff for Dreams, that was a little bumpier, and we've had to sort of figure out, like, how you start new things. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that was a little bit bumpier, but I think we're getting there. And the team have just been incredible. Everybody's just trying so hard, like, I think that's the overwhelming thing, is how much everybody is just trying so hard to just make things work, to be able to do their, as much work as they can, particularly when they've got young families or lots of kids, or, and I think everybody's sort of being thrown in this situation together. So it's just that, I know everybody is trying. I know we've all got a lot to deal with, like we read a lot about the other impacts of the period where it's, causes a lot of anxiety and stress, and we always have to be mindful of that. So it's just, it's a unique time, and I think it's been very interesting to see the other ways it's made us work better as well. I think that some of these things that we're trying to solve with communication are things that we've always needed to solve, actually, but we've now got this sort of, we have to solve them in a new way. And the fact, so I think that I think we will come out of this better and stronger, and maybe even a bit more professional. Maybe.
The games industry? No.
Well, I'm just talking about us. I can't speak for everyone else.
Well, it's interesting you talk. I actually did speak to a developer recently that said that the chat there, who are towards the end of the production on the game, and they are, and their view is that, yes, there's some challenges, particularly around testing and things like that. But actually, when you're at that stage in a game, you sort of, they're practical problems you need to solve. The real challenge has been starting something when you're need to be discussing and bouncing ideas off and things. It's a lot harder to do in a, not impossible, but a lot harder to do in a virtual space. That's interesting that, it's not, this wasn't a one-off conversation. It seems to be reflected.
Because it's things like, it's body language and stuff like that.
And then there's the people element. I mean, I don't manage a team anywhere near the size of yours, but I can see that people are stressed and worried and anxious, and that can often manifest itself. I mean, I've done it, getting very angry about things or upset about things that actually I'm not that upset about or that angry about. I'm upset about things and things I can't control. When there's something out there that people can't control, it can, depending on who you are and what you like, it can create all sorts of challenges. And I guess that's the other thing. And I see a lot of companies have been quite flexible with their teams and their staff in trying to sort of be understanding. And it's not really a question, but
but I think that's where we've been really lucky by Sony's and Jim Ryan's decisions and direction. He sort of took any of that decision making for us all and said, we will support you. We're putting your health first. You are working from home. We will, help you set up your spaces and all of that. They've made I think that has been an incredibly generous and positive thing for the whole company. And actually, he's also been doing these weekly emails to everybody, for the whole company, which have been really good, because I think it's made the company feel smaller in a way, which is kind of weird, because it's a very big organisation, obviously. And I think what I can see is, like, on every level, people are trying to help people feel like we're all in this together, which I think is really good. And especially, like, because you're right, there are moments when it just gets a bit much. Like, you know, I have them where, I mean, you know, oh my goodness, sometimes you just read too much news and it's just like, oh my God, like, what is going on? What timeline? Why are we on this timeline? I want a different one, you know? And it's you know, and I think we're also very lucky. So, you know, I think that's the thing. It's been a time of really looking out for each other. Molecule's always been really good at looking out for people within the media molecule, have always been good at looking out for each other. I see that even more now, which I really which is just really, and that's not a top-down thing necessarily. Obviously, I promote that, but I wouldn't even need to promote that. That's what people just do. That's what all of our team are like. They are just great people. And they do look out for each other. And I think there's that thing of knowing, the thing we've had to learn about communication is when someone's not okay, to just ask them how they are and to just take that time, because they just might need a vent. Like, there's just so much that could be going on right now for them that it might not be anything to do with work, or it might be. Just take that time to listen. Production department at Media Molecule have definitely been working very hard to make sure their team are heard and have a venting moment and everything, and that we're so, yeah, it's mad.
You mentioned already how you might be looking at finding ways, you're learning stuff about communication. So you don't foresee things just going right back to how they were once the virus is eradicated or suppressed, or hopefully? I
mean, I don't know. I think that, like, I look very forward to the day that we can be back in the studio together. I think that is a excellent thing. Whether or not it will be in exactly the same format, who knows? I don't think we will go back to being exactly the same, and I don't want us to go back to being exactly the same. I think that we have learned a lot about how to be together, and that I think we have needed. And I want us to be the next version of us, taking everything we learned from previous the MM at home days, and sort of figuring out what the next version looks like. It's a great reset for people. I think the time has been a very good introspective time to think about who they are and what they want out of life, and, you know, and particularly it's been a time for us all to appreciate each other and what we all bring and what our roles are and where we need each other. So yeah, I can't imagine it just flipping all the way back. No. But I think that, you know, there's great things about the past and there's great things about what's going on now, and there's crap things about the past and crap things about now. I just like to leave the crap things behind and move forward with the great things, and you know, sounds easy.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's,
you know, easy, done. I mean, top tip. Yeah.
Well, I'll switch conversation away from the pandemic. I mean, last year you were, you know, you won the UK Best Boss, as voted for by your own team. What do you think it is about your management style that has attracted such, you know, praise?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't pay them off, I promise, but I don't know. I mean, it's these sorts of things always really kind of, I know that at Media Molecule we have a lot of things that are great, and they're not just because of me, you know, like I'm one of 5 directors, and I'm one of, you know, 80 people there. I think, you know, I very much always want to encourage transparency. That's definitely something that I do. I definitely want to encourage inclusivity. That's definitely something that I do. I definitely want us to make the best thing that we can, and I won't pull my punches about us talking about things when we need to review something. I try to find good ways to do that and be constructive. I don't know, I think maybe people just recognize I'm trying. I don't get it right like all the time. I get it wrong a lot of the time. I think if there's one thing I think people could probably, I can say that I know, I can feel myself, is that I try very hard to do the best job that I can. And we have such a great team that like they are inspiring, you know, who wouldn't want to try to be their best with that group of people, you know, they're all their best. So it's that sort of feeling there of like, I want to do the best job for them.
Wow. So I think you said transparency, inclusivity, and I guess that third one was quality. Is that
quality? Yeah.
So are they your values?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. They would be. Yeah, as in yes, they're very natural. They're natural things to me. Yes. I've learned that it's really important to be transparent. I don't believe that it's good when there is too much gatekeeping or hidden information from people. I'd rather that we were always transparent with people. Makes it easier to just remember what's been said as well. So it's just, you know, so I've always been transparent with the team. And sometimes, you know, that means that it's not always easy. I don't like spin very much. I like to be positive. I like to make people feel good. I'd like to be a cheerleader, but I hate the idea that people would ever think that we pretended something. So that's sort of, that's one of the things. Like if things are difficult, I want people to share in that. They might not need to know everything. Like I don't need to tell them how stressed I am about something or whatever. But so anyway, transparency is important. Inclusivity, I feel very, very passionately about inclusivity. For layer upon layer upon layer of reasons. I very much believe in the quote of like, we're not equal until we're all equal. That to me is very important. I love that the games that we make are for everybody, and I love that they enable anybody with a PlayStation. Quality, you know, it's a business, like where it's a commercial business, we have to maintain the quality, and particularly when you're doing things that are a bit more out there, it's particularly important, I think, because you've got to keep those lights on. So the quality is important. Being known for that is really important.
Because I was going to ask. The question was, does your managerial values and stuff influence the games? But I mean, in inclusivity and quality, I mean, those are two things. I mean, if you ignore the fact that Sackboy's called Sackboy, generally speaking, those games are very accessible and inclusive and obviously, you know, they always get 10 out of 10s in Edge or whatever it is. So they obviously. So I was going to ask, and I mean, I'll still ask the question, but does that manifest itself in the games that you create?
Yeah, for me, it definitely influences me 100%. Like I can't look at anything we do without being me. And you know, I very much also believe like we are part of the media, you know. So when you make a game, you're part of the media, and it's important to be rigorous about how you do talk with your audience, or do, you know, or represent your audience. And yeah, that is really important. So yeah, like when we're reviewing anything, characters or dialogue or representation or anything, like that is definitely, I will always be there asking why or celebrating, or, you know, and I will always encourage people at MM to do the same.
Well, I mean, let's have a talk. I'm going to ask. I've got one question about Dreams, because that project, I remember seeing that. I think it was in Paris, like 7 years ago, and it's been in the works for a long time. And you can tell it's a big project. But I mean, it has to been, I mean, how has it been hard to keep a team motivated for such a long time on one thing?
Yes. But like, I mean, I think that's not unusual. Like, and we're not the longest game, you know, like there are games that take exactly that amount of time with much bigger teams, you know. I think that we've always, there was a very small team working on Dreams for many, many years. So in terms of like people months, we're actually not that, you know, it's not like 200 people for 7 years. So but it is, you know, it's a big, like, ambitious piece of work. You know, we are, our ideas really eclipse the size of us as a studio, you know, like so that's where the time comes in. And yeah, I think with Dreams, because we were working on the things, you know, almost like step by step, it just took time. And yeah, there are times where within that there are people who are like, oh, I'm just waiting for this feature to arrive. I can't do very much until it arrives, and that can be demotivating. Or, you know, there's points at which that were talked about where we had to, where you know, it was time to kind of reboot, do a big refactor, as the programmers say. Producers, you know, nightmare word, refactor. When you know, and that took a big chunk of time, and that was sort of one of the things that made Dreams like infinitely better. But you sometimes have to take a step backwards to go 10 steps forwards. And, you know, so it is, you know, I think that on any project you're on, there's always that thing where you can get into a bit of a grind. But they were never for very long. And, you know, I think the beauty of those moments is that as soon as that thing arrives, we'd have a jam. People would jam with the new features, and we'd see this incredible stuff, and everyone's motivation bucket would be filled right back up again. And so it's just that ebb and flow, basically. And I think that it's not human. It's like completely human to have moments where you just need to be re-energized. You can't expect everybody to be at like 10 out of 10 enthusiasm like every single day. Like, that's insane. So, you know, I think that when there's moments where everyone needs to just re-energize, that's happened, and that's, you know, it's been great to see us go on that journey together. And you know what? When you work on a service, everything's different. You're not working on that same cadence of like, make the game, ship the game, go on holiday. That's not what you do. Instead, you make the game, you do a beta, you do an early access, you release, and then you keep releasing. And so actually, like, people's need to sort of, with people within that, it's a completely different, you have to accept that, like, in that period, you have to approach it like it's the marathon, not the sprint. And we're in this for the long haul. So in that time, people are going to need breaks. We have to handle holidays differently. It's not like you finish and then the whole company can go away like it used to be in the old days.
Yeah.
So everything's been different. I think when you ask, like, has it been hard to motivate people? It's not necessarily been actually hard to keep people motivated. But what's been more of the change has been learning what we need in order to sustain a service, and how that cadence is completely different from a normal game cadence. So yeah, that's the.
Yeah. I actually spoke with Rare recently on who obviously did Sea of Thieves, and their experience well, it's pretty similar in that obviously they tend to release a game, it all gets really hectic just before the launch of something, and then and of course that approach to Sea of Thieves, which they release something every month basically, they can't, that's not sustainable. You can't be on deadline for permanently. You know, people get burnt out, so they've had to completely rethink how they do things as a result of that. I think that's not just you two, I think it's everywhere. I think perhaps live service games companies have been doing it.
It is, and it's so yeah, and I agree with them, and I think I'm the same as them.
Well, I mean, I'm conscious of the time, so I am obviously, this is a pre-record, so we couldn't do any live questions, but I did get some questions from the industry to put to you. And I asked the ones from Debbie Beswick, the CEO of Team 17 first, because I did ask two. And asked the first one, which was, Siobhan, you gave me some great advice about being confident with myself a few years ago at the MTV Businesswoman of the Year. If you could give women any advice to help them aim for top roles within a large organization, what would it be?
So this is it. It's an interesting question, this one. I love this. So thank you, Debbie. So, I mean, to begin with, the first thing to say is, we still live within a patriarchal society, and, those systems, they permeate absolutely everything that we do and the sort of structures that we all work within and exist within. And so, I think it's brilliant that a lot of companies are making great strides to try and address inclusion and diversity and really look at making sure that people are rising through their careers and rising through the ranks. But there is quite a lot of work to be done. So I've got a few pieces of advice here of things that I've learned or have witnessed. And the first of those is I've managed and worked with a lot of men over the years. And one of the things that I've really learned from working with them is how common it is for women to pick up the unwanted jobs, the things between the cracks, and also to pick up very gendered jobs. There are gendered jobs, and I know this from my own career of really having to learn where to put up the boundaries of what was my job and what was something I just felt somehow I had to do. Years ago, I sort of coined it as being like, don't pour the tea. And really what I meant by that was, there had been a point in Media Molecule where at the beginning I loved making these little cream teas and, I love hosting. So it was just this thing that I enjoyed to do. But it sort of became something that I felt had become my job, and I'd become the tea lady. No one had ever asked me to do that. No one expected me to do that. But it was something that I had taken on. And at one point I really sort of questioned why I was, how this had happened. And it sort of ties with things where you are basically picking up jobs that are not necessarily your job, that should or could be done by somebody else. The thing that I learned from that was that really at those times where I have picked up that extra labor or that extra work, the best thing for me to have ever done would have been to have shared that with others and said, there is this work that nobody owns and I'm feeling that I am responsible for doing it, but it's actually not my job either. So can we figure out how we share this between us instead of feeling like I had to take it on? I think it's very natural for women to do that. And my advice is to really look at your job and to make sure that you're aware of what you are doing that is out of the bounds of your role. What are you taking on that is holding you back? What are you taking on that is filling your time and reducing your focus on the job at hand? And if you have those examples, then my advice is talk to people and say, I've ended up taking this on, and I bet you'll be met with a response of, oh, let's figure that out. The second piece of advice is sort of linked to that of being your own advocate and making sure you take your career seriously, and that you find the people with your, work with your manager to be able to plot out your career path. Make sure you learn how to talk about your career and to talk about the progression that you want to make. Make sure that you learn how to ask for things like pay rises. Make sure that if you notice things going on around you, that you talk about it. I partnered with that is to be the advocate of others and to make sure that along this journey we're all taking each other with us. That idea that we are in competition with each other, to me, is not cool. I want this to be us all bringing each other with us. So, be your own advocate. Make sure that you are representing yourself and pushing yourself forward and talking to your manager about how to set out your career path. The fourth piece of advice here is basically to join networks, to have a think about, I've always found that when I have needed advice, it's always been really great that I have people outside of the organization that I'm working in to talk to. Sometimes talking to other people outside will just help either
allow something, a penny to drop or some validation to happen, or just being able to see how different studios work, how roles work in different studios has actually been really useful to me. And so I think being able to find people who can help you understand where you're at with your career, but also perhaps provide mentorship for you to sort of be able to brainstorm, how do I move to that next level? What do I need to learn? How should I approach this with my manager? How should I approach this with my peers? These sorts of things. It's very normal to want to talk about this and be able to process these things. The final thing is really like, if you're doing all of these things and you've got great advice and you've tried them out and you're being your own advocate and you've not taken on any of the extra stuff and you've managed to, and still you're really not getting anywhere where you're working, I think that wherever you are is lucky to have you. And, being able to, again, I guess, be your own advocate in that if your career is not moving at the rate that you wish it was, and you have the chops to match that, then my advice is to find somewhere that respects you and find somewhere that actually will go on that journey with you. It's really, I always think about the games industry or games teams being a bit like a band. And it's a bit glib to say that because of course they're businesses and it's not quite a band. But what I really mean by that is there's that chemistry and respect of each person playing that part. And if you're not feeling respected and you're not feeling like you're progressing, then I sort of advise to find your band, basically. Find the group of people that, that will enjoy you for you and want to push you up and build you up. Like that's one of the best things about finding your team and finding the right group of people. So yes, so that's sort of my advice is basically those areas, and I hope that they are helpful.
There was one more question from Debbie. I'm conscious of the time, and it was, I believe we are all working really hard to build a more diverse working environment, and you have excelled at this. What is the number one tip you could give to business leaders at the highest level in games to encourage a more diverse workforce?
My advice to business leaders is pretty simple. It's basically, by committing to inclusion and having a diverse workforce and having a good environment, it's a bit like committing to a positive culture where you don't just arrive, say it and have it and never have to do anything ever again. There is it's a sort of a commitment to a sort of lifelong tending of that garden and then reaping the rewards from that. Every study there is basically says diversity and having a diverse workforce is brilliant. So, I mean, it's all win-win. The thing that I sort of want to impress on people is the sort of first step is look at your company. Have a look at who is in it. Have a look at your leadership team. Have a look at the upcoming leaders. Talk to them about how they're bringing up the people within their teams. I think that, without sort of starting there, it's difficult. Every studio, every company will have a very different set of actions from that. But to make it tangible and to make it local, I think the first step is just look at your studios, look at your teams. And then from there, have a look at things like, have you passed up people for promotion that really should have been? Is somebody being paid less than their male co-worker? Has somebody been held back by being given tons of faffy work also to do? Or have you just witnessed that happen and not done anything about it? There's a lot of angles to this, but the sort of very first one is to say, look at your company. And then when you start to make those actions, kind of recognize that it's work. And it's good work, it's very rewarding work as you see your studio evolve and, the sort of really positive outcomes that come from that. We've experimented a lot with things like work experience and internships, which are relatively normal for big companies, but for us was pretty unusual at that time. And it's definitely been really beneficial, would absolutely continue doing it. And I think things like really, just setting it as a goal means things like when you're not seeing those candidates coming through via recruitment, sort of really continuously asking that question, why? I think in this sort of scenario, it's really important to just, be able to sort of unemotionally look at your company, your studio, and then really start questioning, why are things the way they are? And that doesn't suddenly mean that, everybody in your leadership team needs to get fired. It's not about that. It's about making sure you are aware and you've got your eyes wide open about the current status of the studio. And I think that really is like the first step, is to sort of look at it and think, okay, what do we actually need to do? And then, we're game developers, we like goals. Set some tangible goals and just start that process. And as as your studio sort of demographics change, I just know you feel good, and it's has a really positive impact on the studio culture. So that's my one bit of advice there.
Brilliant. I'm going to ask one more question to wrap this up. I'm very aware of the time, and I'm just going to. It's a nice one, I think, and it's a simple one. And I was going to ask it myself actually, and it was. I didn't put down who submitted the question. No, that's annoying me. But who have been your biggest influences, either inside of games or outside of games?
So yep, I inspired by lots of people. Inspired by my family very much. Inspired by Barry, my boyfriend, very much. I think within the industry, have been very lucky to have been surrounded by a lot of great people. To mention would be, I always felt very privileged for actually witnessing Megan Scavio's leadership of GDCs through some very difficult times in the industry. And what I loved about Megan, and I think, she inspired me as a leader to be someone that was always looking to unify people and to find ways to say, yes, we can fix that. No problem is insurmountable. And I learned a lot witnessing Megan's leadership. The second is the Guerrilla team, the Guerrilla management team. Angie, McKeel and JB, I have learned a lot witnessing them really sort of change, just genre swap essentially, like move from the Killzone days to Horizon, and to see, them sort of take on this new genre and just kill it was like so inspiring. And to do that whilst Angie's really, really motivated to make sure that Guerrilla is an inclusive company. They walk it like they talk it, and I really have a lot of respect for them. And I love my chats with Angie, so I have a lot of time. I look up to her a lot.
Excellent. That was really good reasons. Really good people. But that is all we have time for, I'm afraid. Thank you so much, Siobhan. For joining us. It's been a real honor to have you on. Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching at home. Stay tuned to the GI Live website or the GamesIndustry.biz YouTube channel for the Best Places Awards ceremony itself. We'll see you in a moment.